My crazy dad put trackers in all our cars but banned anyone from touching his truck. So I tracked it myself, found his secret second family. Dad slapped the ticket flat on the table and made Bowen read the number out loud before anyone was allowed to eat. It was his first ticket ever, and he was only driving 8 miles over on an empty road. But Dad still stood over him with his arms crossed. You think it stops at a ticket? You want me burying one of my kids because you can't work a speed limit? Bowen kept his eyes on the table and said nothing. The next night, Dad went around the table setting a little plastic box down. One for me, one for Bowen, one by Mom's keys, like dealing cards. The boxes each had a tracker inside of them. Every car in this family gets one, he said. I want to know where you are, how fast you're going, and how long you sit there. Honest people don't mind being watched. I asked if his truck got one too. He stopped dealing the boxes and pointed his finger at me across the table. I pay for every car in this driveway. I don't get tracked by my own kids. So the boxes went under our seats, all of ours, and his truck sat in the driveway clean and untouched. The one vehicle nobody was allowed to ask about. He handled all the money too, because nobody else could be trusted with it. What Dad never stopped to think about is that a man who teaches his whole family how easy it is to track a car has also taught the one daughter paying attention. Build up. For the first month, his eyes never left that app. He came into my room one night holding his phone up. 40 minutes in a parking lot. Start talking. I told him I had been sitting in my car crying over a breakup. Then you can cry at home. He took my keys off the dresser on his way out, and I was grounded a week. Then the money in this house started getting strange. Dad sold the fishing boat he loved more than most people, and when I asked why, he said, didn't use it, and left before I could ask anything else. He told my mom the dishwasher would have to wait because we couldn't swing it, and the next morning I watched him zip a fat envelope of cash into the bottom of his work bag and pull a shirt over it. One night I heard him through the garage door, low and fast. I'll bring it Thursday. I always bring it Thursday, don't I? I pushed the door open and the phone was already down at his side. Just checking the oil, he said, and there was no rag in his hand. I was sure my dad had a money problem, a debt or a habit, because all of it pointed at cash draining out of this house. So I did the one thing he had spent a whole month teaching me how to do. I took the spare tracker box that had been meant for a car we sold, and one evening while he showered, I slid it up under the seat of the truck he said nobody got to touch. Climax. For 3 days, the truck went exactly where Dad said, the delivery yard, the gas station, home. Then on Thursday, the day from that call, I watched the pin leave his work, turn the wrong way across town, and stop at a small gray house with a basketball hoop over the driveway. He never checked the app on a Thursday night because Thursday nights he was not watching any of us. So the next Thursday, I drove out and parked a few houses down, and his truck was already in that driveway like it belonged there. The front door opened and a woman waved him in like she had done it 1,000 times. Then 2 kids came tearing out, a boy maybe 6 and a smaller girl, and hit his legs yelling, Daddy, Daddy! He grinned and swung the little girl up onto his hip the way you only hold a child you have carried every day of her life. Dinner's almost ready, the woman called. Coming, he called back, and he walked into that house and pulled the door shut behind him. I sat in my car on that strange street and did not start the engine for a long time. There was no debt. There was no card game. There was a whole second family living off the money my dad swore we could not spare. In a house with a basketball hoop my brother would have loved. Payoff. Here is the one thing my dad never understood about his own rule. He put a tracker in every car so none of us could keep a secret from him. And the only person in this family running a real secret was him. There was nothing for me to record and no one for me to run and tell. The app he made us all install to watch each other had room for one more car. I didn't say a word to him because noise was never going to be what beat a man like my dad. I added his truck to the same family app he had forced on the rest of us, under his own name, and the truck nobody could ask about sat right there on the map beside us. The next morning, my mom opened the app like she did every morning to check on her kids, and there was the truck, parked overnight at a gray house across town none of us knew. She did not have to ask me a single question. By the time Dad came down, she was at the table with her phone in her hand, Bowen beside her, the map open between them. Dad picked up his mug, saw the screen, and spat out all the liquid in shock. Bradford just stood there with coffee dripping down his chin, staring at the phone screen like it might change if he looked at it long enough. Morgan did not yell. That was the thing that scared me the most, because my mother was not a quiet woman when she was upset. But this morning she spoke in a voice I had never heard before, flat and exact, like she had been practicing the words in her sleep. Whose house is that, Bradford? She said, and every word landed like she was placing it on the table one at a time. Bradford wiped his mouth with the back of his hand and took a slow sip like nothing in the world was wrong. A coworker's, he said. I helped him move some furniture and it got late, so I crashed on his couch. Morgan tapped the screen. It says you were there from 6 in the evening until 5:30 this morning. That's a lot of furniture. Bradford set the mug down hard enough to slosh coffee over the side. He looked at Bowen. You do this? You put my truck on the app? Bowen shook his head, and I could tell from his face that he was seeing all of this for the first time. Bradford's eyes slid to me. He didn't ask. He just said it. You. I didn't look away. You taught me how. Something moved behind his eyes. Something quick and hot. And then Bradford went on the attack the way he always did when he felt the ground shifting. He stood up and pointed at me the same way he had pointed the night he gave out the trackers. You went into my truck. You touched my property. After I specifically told this family that truck was off limits. Then he turned to Morgan like he was presenting evidence. You see what your daughter does? She goes behind my back, digs through my things, and now she's trying to start something because she's still mad about being grounded. He said it with so much confidence that for half a second I almost felt guilty, and I hated myself for that because that was exactly how he worked. He could make you feel wrong about catching him being wrong. But Morgan did not look at me. She did not take her eyes off Bradford for even a second. I didn't ask who put the tracker there, she said. I asked whose house that is. Bradford's mouth opened and closed. He sat back down slowly and tried a softer angle, reaching across the table for Morgan's hand. Baby, listen to me. I know what it looks like, but if I was doing something wrong, would I be sitting right here? Morgan pulled her hand back fast, like his fingers were something hot. You sat right here every Thursday for months and told me you were working late, she said. So yes, you would. Bradford's jaw got tight. Before he could say anything, Bowen spoke. Dad, just answer the question, he said, and his voice was low and calm, like he was still hoping there was an answer that would make all of this okay. Bradford shot him a look that could cut glass. Pass. Stay out of this. Bowen flinched, but he did not look down the way he used to. I pulled out my own phone and opened the tracking app, the same app he had made us all install, and turned the screen so everyone could see it. The history was all there. Every Thursday, same house, same address, 6 in the evening to early the next morning, going back weeks. I scrolled slowly so there was no way to pretend it was a glitch. It's the same house every time, Dad, I said. Same night, same hours, just tell her. Bradford stood up fast, his chair scraping back. He reached for my phone and I pulled it back and held it against my chest. Morgan's voice cut through the room like a knife. Sit down, Bradford. He did not sit. He stood there with his chest moving up and down and looked at each one of us like we were strangers. This family is turning on me. Everything I do, every dollar I make, every rule I set to keep us safe, and this is how I get paid back. He said it like he really believed it. Morgan stood up. She was not crying. She was not shaking. Her face was the calmest I had ever seen it, and that was the part that made me hold my breath. She walked over to the counter, picked up her keys, and said, "If you won't tell me, I'll drive there myself." Bradford's whole body changed. The man who had been pointing fingers folded inward, like someone had pulled a string out of his spine. For the first time in my life, I saw fear on my father's face. Real fear. "Morgan, don't," he said, and his voice cracked on her name. Morgan held the keys in her hand, then talk. The room went completely silent. I could hear the fridge humming. Bradford looked at the table, at the tracker app still glowing on Morgan's phone, and then he looked at me, and I watched something break behind his eyes. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't shame. It was the look of a man who had run out of doors. He sat down slowly, put both hands flat on the table, and said, "Her name is Eleanor." The name sat there in the air like smoke. And then Bradford did what Bradford always does. He didn't apologize. He explained. "I met Eleanor 7 years ago," he said, and his voice had gone steady again, like saying her name had unlocked something. "Before you say anything, I never stopped providing for this house. Not once. Every bill, every grocery run, I covered it." He said it like that was supposed to mean something. Morgan stared at him. "7 years?" she said, and her voice was so quiet I almost didn't hear it. Bradford nodded, and I swear he nodded like he expected her to be impressed. "I kept both of my families fed. Most men can barely handle one. Both of my families." He said it like it was normal, like it was something people just did, like keeping 2 families was the same as keeping 2 cars running or working 2 jobs. He was proud of it. That was the part that made me sick. He was actually proud. Then he kept talking, and what came next was worse than anything I had been ready for. He talked about Eleanor the way you talk about something you managed well, like a side business that turned a profit, like a second property he had been maintaining on the weekends, and then he said their names, Aldrich and Lexi. He said them the way you say the names of kids you have tucked in at night, easy and familiar, like they were always part of the conversation, and we just hadn't been paying attention, like everyone at this table should have already known who they were. I watched my mother's face while he talked, and I don't think I will ever forget what I saw there. It wasn't anger. It wasn't sadness. It was the look of a woman doing math in her head, adding up every late Thursday, every missing dollar, every excuse she had believed. Bowen pushed his chair back. His face was white. "You have other kids?" he said, and his voice broke on the last word in a way that made him sound like he was 12 again. Bradford looked at him like it was a simple question. "They're your brother and sister, technically. I was going to introduce everyone when the time was right." He said it like it was a scheduling issue. Bowen stared at him. "When was the time going to be right, Dad? When we were 40? Bradford didn't answer that. He turned in his chair and looked directly at me, and his whole face changed. The softness was gone. What was underneath was cold and sharp and aimed right between my eyes. I had a plan. I was going to sit this family down over the holidays, explain everything properly, give your mother the respect of hearing it from me, and you took that from me." He leaned forward. "If this family falls apart, that's on you, not me." And the room tilted. He said it with so much weight that for one horrible second I almost believed him. I looked at Bowen, and Bowen glanced at me, just for a second, and I could see it, this tiny question forming behind his eyes. And that is exactly what Bradford wanted. Make me the problem. Make the person who found the lie bigger than the lie itself. I opened my mouth, but I didn't have to say a word, because Morgan sat back down. She lowered herself into the chair slowly, and I braced myself. I thought she was going to crack. I thought the tears were coming, or the screaming, but Morgan didn't do any of that. She sat there for a long second, looking at the table, and then she said one word, "The boat." Bradford blinked. "What? You sold the boat to pay for them, didn't you?" she said, and her voice was calm and clear, like she was reading off a list she had been keeping in her head for years without knowing why. "And the dishwasher, and the vacation we canceled last summer, and Bowen's braces that I had to put on a payment plan, because you said we were short." She listed each one like she was reading receipts off a register, one after another, click, 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 every sacrifice, every time she had gone without, every time she had told herself it was fine because money was tight and Bradford was doing his best. Bradford said nothing. His mouth was a straight line. His hands were still flat on the table, but his fingers had gone stiff, like he was pressing them into the wood to keep them from shaking. Morgan looked at him, and her voice did not waver. "You didn't just lie to me," she said. "You made me feel like I was asking for too much every time I needed something for this family. You made me feel guilty for wanting a dishwasher while you were buying groceries for another woman's house." I watched the whole thing shift right there at that table. Bradford had walked into this conversation thinking he could point at me and make everyone look my direction, but Morgan was not looking at me anymore. She was looking at every missing dollar, every time she had clipped coupons, every time she had told me and Bowen we had to wait because Dad said the budget was tight. The room was not on Bradford's side anymore. It had swung all at once like a door blown open by wind, and there was nothing he could grab onto to pull it back. Morgan looked at him steady and said, "How much, Bradford? How much of our money went to that house?" Bradford sat up a little straighter, and for a second I thought he might actually tell the truth, but he didn't. He looked at Morgan and said, "It's my money. I earned it." Morgan nodded. It was a slow nod, the kind where you can see the person making a decision behind their eyes. Not a hot decision, but the kind that locks into place like a deadbolt turning. "Okay," she said. "Okay." And the way she said it, twice, quiet and calm and final, that was the moment I knew my mother was done. Not angry, not broken, done. Morgan pushed back from the table and walked out of the room without looking at any of us. She didn't slam anything. She just stood up and left like she had somewhere to be, and I followed her because something in the way she moved told me she was not going to sit in this house for one more hour. She went straight up upstairs and pulled a suitcase out of the closet, the big blue one we used for vacation, back when we still took vacations. She started folding clothes from her dresser, neat and tight. Not Bradford's clothes, her own. I'm not staying in a house where I have to beg for a dishwasher while he plays daddy across town, she said, her voice still that same flat, calm thing. Call your Aunt Theodora. Ask if she has room. I called Theodora, and she picked up on the second ring like she had been sitting there waiting for someone to need her. I barely got 3 sentences out before she cut me off. Bring her, Theodora said. Bring Bowen too. I have room for all 3 of you. Bradford appeared in the bedroom doorway. He must have been listening from the stairs because he showed up exactly when the suitcase was almost full. Morgan, you're being dramatic. You're going to pack a bag and run to your sister's house because our daughter decided to play detective? Think about what that looks like. Morgan zipped the suitcase shut. The sound of that zipper was the loudest thing in the room. It looks like a woman who finally saw where her husband goes on Thursday nights. She walked toward the door. Bradford was standing in it, filling up the doorway with his shoulders, and that look on his face that said he was still in charge here. Morgan stopped right in front of him. Move, Bradford. He did not move. Then Bowen appeared behind him in the hallway. I don't know when he came upstairs. Dad, move. Just 2 words. Quiet. Firm in a way I had never heard from my brother before. Bradford turned his head and looked at Bowen's face, and whatever he saw there made him step to the side. Bradford followed us out. Of course he did. He followed us through the living room and down the driveway. Still talking, still managing. If you leave, you're making a decision you can't undo. I'm not going to chase you. Morgan lifted the suitcase into the trunk and turned to look at him, standing there in his own driveway next to his untouchable truck. I know you won't. You have another family for that. Bradford's face went blank, like someone had wiped it clean. I got behind the wheel because I could see my mother's hands now, and they were finally starting to shake. She had held them steady through the whole house, through the packing, through the doorway, but now that she was outside, her fingers were trembling against the car door. Bowen climbed in the back without saying anything. I backed out of the driveway, and in the mirror I could see Bradford standing there, alone, next to the truck that had started all of this, watching his first family drive away. The drive to Theodora's felt longer than it was. Nobody talked. Morgan stared out the window. Bowen stared at his phone, but I don't think he was reading anything on it. I just drove and tried not to think too hard about any of it because I knew if I started, I wouldn't stop. Theodora met us at the door and didn't ask a single question. She just opened it wide and let us walk in, and she had already put fresh sheets on the guest bed and set out towels like she had been getting ready since the second she hung up the phone. Morgan sat down at her sister's table and went quiet. Not the kind of quiet where someone is about to talk. The kind where someone has run out of everything and the tank is just empty. Theodora put a cup of coffee in front of her and sat down across from her and did not push. She didn't say, "Tell me what happened." She didn't say, "I always knew he was no good." She just sat there with her own cup and waited, and the house was so still I could hear the clock on the wall ticking. After a long time, Morgan spoke. I checked that app every morning. Every single morning. I knew where my kids were. I knew where the cars were. And the one car I never looked at was the one I should have been watching the whole time. Theodora reached across the table and put her hand over Morgan's. You weren't supposed to have to watch your husband, Morgan. That's not on you. Morgan didn't answer. She just looked down at her coffee, and I sat across from her and felt the full weight of what I had done land on me like something heavy falling from a high shelf. I had found the truth. I had turned on the map and followed the pin and used the system he built against him, and it worked. But I had also handed my mother the worst morning of her life. I hadn't warned her. I just added the truck to the app and let her walk into it blind because I thought the proof would speak for itself. And it did, but it spoke to her first, alone, before she'd even had her coffee. That was the thing I was going to have to carry. Late that night, after Morgan had gone to the guest room and Bowen had fallen asleep on the couch, I sat on Theodora's porch steps by myself. The street was dark and quiet, and the air was cool, and I just sat there for a while not looking at anything. Then my phone buzzed. It was a text from Bradford. You happy now? You got what you wanted. I hope it was worth destroying this family. I read it twice. I sat there on those cold steps with the screen glowing in my hands, and I read every word twice because I wanted to make sure I felt exactly what I felt before I answered. Then I typed back, "You destroyed it. I just turned on the map." I hit send. Then I blocked his number, set the phone face down on the step beside me, and sat there in the quiet until I couldn't feel my fingers anymore. Morgan filed for divorce within the week. The tracking app stayed active on every phone in the family, and Bradford's truck still showed up on the map, a little dot moving between 2 houses he could no longer pretend were separate lives. Bowen did not return his father's calls for a long time. I thought about the night Bradford set those little plastic boxes on the table like he was dealing cards, so sure that the only people with something to hide were his children. He taught his whole family how to watch. He just never imagined any of them would watch him. The last time I checked the app, his truck was parked at the gray house, and I closed the screen and did not open it again.